I was so excited when I heard that you scored a movie, and I really enjoyed the end result. Tell me how this all came about and you got this opportunity to, executive produce and do the music for The Breach.
Well, like when it comes to producing, one of the turn-ons to producing is to be able to be involved with the music. So it's almost a prerequisite. If I'm going to produce something, I want to have something to do with the music, given that I'm a musician. So anyway, but with The Breach, I love the story and we got into it. And so I told Rodrigo, I definitely want to write some melodies for this, and but I don't want to actually score the whole movie. And it's one of those things where I don't have the wherewithal to be able to sit still that long and score an entire movie. So I like to work with other composers so I can give them an idea, and then they can actually deal with the instrumentation and we can sort of work on it together, but they can do the heavy lifting because I just don't have the patience for it. So on this one, I wrote a bunch of stuff, and then Anthony Hunt, who's one of the production partners on this, he introduced me to a guy named Ibar Alton, who is the composer. And Ibar and I communicated. This was all during COVID, so everything was done sort of long distance. And he and I communicated via email and sending tapes back and forth, or recordings back and forth. I had my ideas and how he interpreted those ideas and back and forth. And so we finally arrived at something that I thought sounded really cool. So that was like the intro and a couple other bits in the movie. And then there's a couple scenes that I recorded just on a single acoustic guitar that are incorporated in other parts of the movie that I actually sort of timed to the dailies. So anyway, that's sort of like the process.
That's super cool. And what was most unique about, creating music for a movie versus kind of traditional songwriting? Because you're really there to kind of elevate the story and complement what's happening on screen.
Yeah, well, as a songwriter, even I'm more of a composer than a songwriter. I really put musical ideas together in certain kind of sort of song arrangements, but I'm really thinking about how the music works off itself as opposed to what the vocal is. I don't sing along with it necessarily. But when I'm working on something, off of a script or a visual or both, I use a completely different part of my musical mind. It's a different part of me than writing for a record for a rock band. I start basing everything off of my visual imagination to what the story is and what it looks like in my mind, and I start coming up with those ideas. And it's really sort of new for me because I didn't start doing this until, like, the first movie I worked on was 2013. And I love when you put the right piece of music to the right visual, even if it's a pre-recorded song by a band, on a soundtrack. But when you put it together with the right visual, it's the ultimate entertainment experience. So being able to write to a concept of a story invokes a whole different part of my, imagination musically, and it's a lot of fun to do it.
That's awesome. And I saw on a Reddit AMA that you said that you listen to a lot of movie scores. Do you have some particular composers or some film scores that have really, served as an influence?
Right. Well, I was just talking about, I said Ennio Morricone, who is somebody that I always loved. He did The Thing, which was one of John Carpenter's movies, and that was one of my favorite horror movie scores. But he also did a lot of great westerns, spaghetti westerns and stuff. And I really do like Hans Zimmer, and I have to say that I love John Williams, is one of my all-time favorite film composers. But there's some obscure people that have just done these really great scores that they're not big household names. And I can't remember the name of the girl who won an award for doing the Joker, but that particular score was fantastic. And then Johnny Greenwood's score for There Will Be Blood was amazing. If I sat here and thought about it, I could give you hundreds of different scores that are really fucking amazing. But those are a couple that come off the top of my head.
Awesome. And what I like about this movie is that,
For that man,
yeah,
John Carpenter is great. Yeah.
yeah, he's incredible. And, the movie starts with this body being found, and there's sort of a slow burn, but then we get just some awesome body horror by the end. How was it kind of using, your music to kind of build that tension and aid the narrative there in that manner?
Well, I mean, it's not something that there was a lot of forethought. I sort of just looked. I mean, that body in the water scene was one of those tension moments where the boat's floating down the river and the group of picnickers see it, and and then they discover it, and they're horrified and they come screaming. And that was something that I wrote a certain kind of a riff for, and then I worked with Ibar to do this sort of build thing. So it wasn't like a conscious effort, we're going to build this, but it was just a natural thing to do it. It just lent itself to that. And I think throughout the movie, you just sort of get a feel for what's happening, and you don't really even consciously identify it. You just sort of go with it the way that it feels like it's going to go.
And rock music and horror as genres have always just kind of gone together. There's like a gel between them, and it's just a natural fit. Why do you think those genres just kind of work so well together?
I have a theory on that. I think a lot of it has to do with horror and rock and roll music have a kindred spirit. There are a kindred spirit because they're both rebellious. They're both antisocial in a sort of general society type of way. They're both use sort of individualistic thinking and disturbing social commentary and subject matter. They're perfect for each other. They just work. But I also think that great classical obviously works with horror, but a lot of especially sort of modern horror, especially like when you get into stuff that involves teenagers and slashers and that sort of frenetic pace stuff, rock and roll works really well for it, that because it's got a certain energy that helps support that. Anyway, I mean, I could theorize about it all I want but there definitely is a relationship there.
Yeah, for sure. And something I've always been curious
Like, I
about.
don't know I don't know why fusion jazz works for porn though.
That's a great question. Uh, I've always been curious. You have a cameo as a DJ in Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie. How did that come about?
That's so funny to bring that up. I didn't even know that. All right. I forgot. I don't even know when that was done. I don't know what state I was in, a state of mind I was in because I was recently reminded of that. Not, like a few months ago. And I'd completely forgotten about it, and I still can't remember actually doing it.
That's funny. One thing you
I,
probably remember is your great collaborations with Michael Jackson. Given to Me is one of my favorites. How did you find Michael as a collaborator? Because you work together so well.
Mike just, Mike does his thing and he does it so fucking incredibly well. I mean, he just exudes what it just comes out of him, and he just let me do my thing. So I just did what came natural to me, and he sort of just let me have the floor. That was basically it. There wasn't again a lot of forethought. When I did Give In to Me, I went down to the studio, met up with Michael for like 15 minutes. He went to dinner and I worked with the producer, and I just put guitars on the thing and left. And then Michael heard it, and I got a call back the next day. Loves it. It's great. And that was that. So it wasn't real sort of what you call like true collaborating. It was just like Slash, do your thing on this, you know, that kind of deal.
Yeah, that's also kind of incredible that, such an artist would have that full trust in you and like to give that sign off to like he knows that you would do best. I mean, that's pretty incredible too.
It evolved into a lot of live performances and stuff during that period in the 90s. And yeah, I guess he sort of related to what he thought my trip was all about and just let me just do my thing. So it was great for me because I loved working with Michael because he's such a phenomenal talent. And I would have been probably not into it if he tried to get me to conform to some other person or style or whatever, and it probably would never have happened.
And then my last question for you, you were front and center for the Guitar Hero 3 video game, and that really got a lot of people, back into different aspects of rock music at the time, and that was hugely popular. Did you feel like that kind of introduced you to a whole different audience through that game?
There's some funny Guitar Hero stories. I mean, when Guitar Hero first came out, I stayed clear of it. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. It just looked like a silly toy, right? And so the second iteration of Guitar Hero, there was one on the Gibson tour bus, and I was having a meeting on the Gibson tour bus, and my kids were with me, and my kids were, I don't even know what year that was, but they were pretty young. And so I took them in the back lounge, and they had that game, and I said, "Oh, here, check this out." And I got it set up so they could play it. And in doing so, I was like, "Oh, this is actually sort of cool." I know all these songs. What is this? Anyway, so because of my seemed interest in it, Guitar Hero contacted me not too long after that and got me involved in Guitar Hero 3. And so I did the motion capture video thing with them and all that to be a character in the game. And they ended up putting me on the box. So I was introduced to a legion of kids all under the age of 10 from that game. And I actually went over to go visit a producer friend of mine's place one night. And I went over there, and his kid came out of the dressing room and he freaked out when he saw me because he couldn't believe the guy on the box was actually a real person. Lost his mind. And that's stuck with me ever since. I'd never witnessed that before. So it was an interesting sort of new reality, that period during the Guitar Hero period.